Soccer-wise here with David Goss and Tom Boger. We are moving to the Midwest in our season previews to talk about St. Louis City SC. We had on the two hosts of Ball Watching to talk about all things going on in St. Louis, and not off-season because their off-season was in July of 2024 and June of 2024. They got most of their work done in the summer. And Tom, I don't know, have you ever heard of a country named Germany?
They have. Get ready to learn 2 Bundesliga, buddy. Jokes aside, I absolutely love those additions of Marcel Hardo, Cedric Teuchert, Giannis Horn. I think that one was a super low-key one because he doesn't do things like spectacularly, but he's just kind of always intelligent in the right spot, really clean technique. So, as you said, they had their off-season in the summer. They brought in a lot of very good players. I think if the transfer window opened, if they had an extra 6 games, I think that they would have had a real run to the playoffs. The people at St. Louis tell you if we had 2 or 3 more games, we absolutely would have made the playoffs. That was their confidence level. I cannot wait to see what it looks like over a full season.
I can't wait to get back to St. Louis. I spent a lot of time there in my youth. I have not been since it's been an MLS team. It is elite Vietnamese food, so you already have me sold. You know you're getting, I've never had like Bosnian food, so I got to get in there and get me a little bit of like fresh grilled kebabs and some baked breads and all that type of stuff. But St. Louis is a party. St. Louis is a fun time. The team has hit, right? The atmosphere in the stadium is elite. The connection to, I think, the community, what this team can be in MLS is a really, really cool spot. And now it's about putting it together on the field, but they're going to have this unique setup, which is their preseason was all of last season. So they should hit the ground running, except they'll do so with a new manager. Olaf Melberg through the door. The picture of him with all the other managers at media marketing was elite because he didn't have his arms around anyone else, and everyone was so excited to be pictured next to Olaf Melberg.
I'll tell you, man, so I'm trying to get info about this guy. Just, hey, how's it been going? What's preseason like? And they talk about him on the field, obviously very good coach, everything else smart, tactically trying to get all of this stuff. And then I'm like, all right, so how's he been? Kind of, I go, hey, Swedish. I said, okay, that's just a factual statement. I go, yeah, no, he's a little standoffish. He doesn't, man, a few words. He's Swedish. I was like, is that a thing for Swedes? I wasn't aware. But that we'll see. Maybe Apple TV can get some good sound bites out of him before the games, after the games, whatever it is. So I'm excited to hopefully learn about a new personality, or maybe he'll be guarded, and that will be his personality. Who knows?
He's one of those interesting coaches where you know so much about him as a player, but so little as a coach. And so he's not an unknown, and yet he's an unknown. And that will be really interesting to watch. Clear connection for, the soccer he wants to play with Lutz Pfannenstiel, who is the real soccer mind behind this club. And some clubs have their sporting directors a little more disconnected to what you see on the field. Clearly, Lutz Pfannenstiel very involved. And so Olaf Melberg now will get the opportunity to roll it out there on the field. The expectations will be high for him, mainly because Bradley Carnell won the West as an expansion coach and was out a few months later. And so that means that this team believes they should be pushing at a high level in the Western Conference. So let's go to our breakdown now for a little bit more on St. Louis. Well, we've talked to Tom enough. Let's talk to some people who care about things and know what's going on the field. And we're talking St. Louis City SC. I don't know how to say it in German, but I will learn probably over the course of this year from some of the new signings. Jake and Justin here from the Ball Watching podcast, one of the many strong podcasts covering St. Louis. We were spoiled for choice, but we were really glad to be doing this all together. How's everyone doing?
Lovely, David. We're pumped to be on the show. When I texted Justin about this opportunity, we were like, who in their right minds would bite off the work effort of getting with all the teams, all the different hosts locally, and getting the full preview series together? Clearly you guys are, but we're glad to be a part of it and to contribute in our own way.
Yeah, it is. It's always good to know who the idiot in the room is, because normally it means it's not you. And so congratulations to both of you. St. Louis, obviously, incredible soccer market, right? We knew that. We've known that for 50 years, 70 years, whatever you want to call it. There's been a lot of iterations of professional teams. St. Louis City SC hit the ground running year one. Unbelievable atmosphere, unbelievable stadium, an unbelievable performance on the field. Shifted a little bit in year two. Give me an idea, Justin, of just what the experience was like last year, of what the energy in St. Louis was still around this team.
It's something that it's been unmatched, in my opinion. I think you guys have seen that. For anybody that tunes in on Apple, and you could see just the way that the fans are still showing out and the sellouts that we have. Yes, the team took, I wouldn't even call it a dip. We kind of nosedived a little bit going into our second season after winning the West in our first season, but it's not something that the fans were like, oh, now we're done. Like, it was an exciting first year, get it out of the way. We were extremely spoiled. Yes, we'll be the first ones to say that. We were not expecting that kind of success in the first year. We were definitely not expecting that kind of a downturn in the second year, but the fans were still showing out. Matt Seaback and team do an incredible job of the actual atmosphere at the game, the show, the lights, the cards, everything that they do. So it makes it a fun time, and it kind of revives that area of St. Louis.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those where I think you look at teams, and year one, it's always exciting, right? It's a new toy, it's a new game, all that stuff. And then it was good. And so then there's that little worry of what happens when it's not. And it felt like last year the fans stayed with it, and it felt like there was still a good atmosphere and still a good experience around this team. And then things got a little better in the summer. We like to do our transfer sort of update. Then we'll get into our Doyleisms, where our sage, our legend, will give us his ideas of what he thinks is going to happen with this team. And then Andrew Wiebe brings us back down at the end with his over-under line and ruining all of our days. And for the transfer update, this is an odd one because, like I said, most of it was done last year. And so this is a St. Louis team where when you talk about them, you talk about potential because it's still a little unknown just how it all fits together and how these players will look over a full MLS season. But only two big names brought in the transfer window: Timo Baumgartel, 28-year-old German center back from Schalke, and Konrad Vollum, brought in as a 24-year-old. We don't know the exact position, but good soccer player overall, from Prague. And those are the two adds, Jake, to what was a lot of movement last year. Overall, what do you make of the work Lutz Van den Steel has done?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to put my consensus sort of, letter grade on this transfer window for us until we get to see the product on the field. I think he did a lot of his homework early, right, in the summer, like you mentioned. And, when things were, whether you want to call it a nosedive, you want to call it a drop-off for us, we hit that panic button, for lack of a better term, and we definitely went out into the market, got aggressive, got in some proven talent, in their prime of their athletic window. And so I judge him for that, and we saw that output, towards the end of last season. It was great, a much better turn for us. This transfer window, it's been, I think, a little bit, some folks might call it disappointing because you said, hey, you improved. Now you need to take us over the line. Can you get aggressive like you were and make sure we for sure hit the ground running this year versus banking on it? And in terms of our ending last season. So I think it's been very conservative, but I think intentionally so. And I'm actually on the board on the side of being okay with what we've done because we filled, some more depth in the center back side, which is good. We had a lot of injuries there last year. And Baumgartel, probably high floor, probably not as high of a ceiling, but a guy that you kind of know what you're getting from and you don't expect to call on, too much with who we have in front of him. On the Vollum side, I think a lot more upside with him. And in terms of his playing experience, he's still pretty young. He has some time to develop. And he's coming in at a time where our formations and our tactics are all really flexible, I feel like, in some of the preseason matches we've seen under Coach Olaf Melberg. So we'll see on him. But central midfield, left midfield, right midfield, sounds like he can kind of play the wings. He can play inside. He's very, very tidy footwork from what we've seen in the small sample size so far. But I'm optimistic, and I think he's the most exciting so far. But I do expect us to be probably pretty active this summer, if I'm not incorrect from how we've seen Lutz operate in the past.
Let's go back to last summer. Obviously, we're all going to we love to talk about defenders here at SoccerWise, but let's talk about the attackers. Justin, we saw Marcel Hartl and Cedric Teuchert come in. Hartl, maybe the big one. What did you see from them so far, and what have they sort of been like around that St. Louis atmosphere?
It was incredible because I think my favorite stat, which is, favorite to say, it's hard for me to say as a City fan, but we were the only team in the MLS to not have at least a goal scorer score 6 goals. We had 3 guys with 5, and then Houston was the only team that had 6. Every other team had at least one person with 7 goals. We had 3 with 5. So you can see the kind of the spread out there. The most insane part about that, though, is that Teuchert had 5 goals in the time period that he had. So that's tied for the team lead in 10 games played. If you look at every other guy in the MLS, I'm going straight into the stats on this one, David. If you look at every guy in the MLS that scored 5 goals in the season, he was number 11 in goal contribution per minute in the MLS, just in that small sample size we had there. Then he also had 4 assists that was tied for second in the team lead, so a goal contribution every 81 minutes. Big pickup by him. Another massive pickup was Hartel with 3 goals, 7 assists. 7 assists led our team by far with 3 more assists than anybody else in the season. He had an average goal contribution of 85 minutes per every goal contribution. And then Simon Betcher's one that we haven't really talked about a lot. St. Louis, born and raised.
Don't worry, I was going to get the SLU guy up there. Don't worry.
I'm just saying, I was on the team at SLU. I don't even know if I can really say I played that often. But big Simon Betcher fan, 4 goals for us, tied for second most on the team in that small span as well. So when you look at those 3 guys that we brought in the summer transfer window, 26% of our goal output, goals scored, came from those guys in the last 10 games of the season, where we finished 4-3-3. We only had 8 wins in the entire season. So when these guys came in, they literally doubled our win total in that small span. So I think that's why we weren't as concerned with the winter transfer window, because we worked so hard in that summer transfer window. And I do think that it's really, hopefully, knock on wood, going to start to mesh to kick off season this year.
Yeah, a lot of those numbers are high-level playoff teams, promising stuff, and it just came down to games. I will make you feel bad for this one thing. We did our over-under for Minnesota. The over-under was 5.5 players to score 5 goals or more, because last year they had 6. So that gives you that comparison. They did not have an uber score. I think Bongi was their leader with 11, but they had 6 players over that line where St. Louis struggled. So that shows you the gap between finishing 5th or 6th in the Western Conference and finishing outside the playoff spots. And that's what St. Louis is trying to overcome this year. And it feels like, for the most part, a lot of it has been set up very well. On the outbounds for this team, Thorson, probably the big one. I think sort of an acknowledgement it didn't work out, and you move on, especially with the new attacking pieces brought in. Kojima sent to DC United to fit probably that system right behind Jared Stroud, just as we have seen in the past as DC tries to follow the St. Louis model. And Pedro as well sent out on loan. But the big name, Jake, you mentioned, was Olaf Melberg. That maybe is the winter for this team. He is one of, I think, the most exciting adds to Major League Soccer. There's a lot of unknown. That's why. It is a very good-looking head coach that people are very excited about as well. What have you made of him so far and sort of what he will be like as a coach?
I love it. No, if he can coach as well as he looks, we're going to be in business here. But no, he's one. I think the verdict's still out. Obviously, we're in preseason. We've never seen him, coach here before, and we'll give him time. I think this club specifically will be patient with him. I think they have more term and focus with this hiring, given he's still a young age, doesn't have a ton of experience from the coaching side, but what he lacks there, I feel like he makes up in terms of his prowess in his playing career, playing with huge clubs and huge personalities and players, at Juve, at Aston Villa, at Villarreal, Olympiacos, just to name a few. He knows what it's like to be in a big club atmosphere, and he's a defender, by trade as well. And I hear that, and I love it, because defense has been, to me, at least last season, was definitely a weakness for us. And, some of that came down to injury and lack of continuity with who you lined up in your back four. But I also just think there were gaps, and there was definitely not enough of a focus on that for me. And I think he will bring that for us. He's already brought at least a semblance of some pretty big change by rolling out a back 3 in all of our preseason matches so far. So if that tells you anything, he's not taken long to start tinkering and start adjusting. And I think if that can translate to more stability, especially when the ball comes to transitions or turnovers for us in the offensive third, we were just, the amount of goals or at least opportunities we conceded off of the back of a transition or just it was absurd. LAFC ran rampant on us. We could do nothing, and they're the team that just do that the best, right, in terms of the direct style. But that is something I think we needed some huge improvement on. I think he will do well to shore us up there. And I think part of that will come with probably a formation change, give you a little more stability in the back, adding some dynamic wing backs into the mix that can kind of do both. So I'm excited about what he'll bring. I think it's still, again, the verdict's still out. I want to see it. I haven't seen it a ton from his coaching resume, but I'm hoping that he can be a good kind of piece in this puzzle of St. Louis City and really fit us.
A very young coach. Justin, you talked about the numbers to end last year, though. Was anyone here surprised that Hack didn't get the job or that it wasn't Hackworth?
I think not overly surprised. I think it's one where I do think that he showed a lot of faith there, and I think the biggest thing, honestly, David, wasn't even on the field; it was off the field. There was a locker room issue that we had with Bradley Carnell, and I think Hack kind of fixed that. You could see that in the players; they wanted to play with him. They played for him before, previously with City 2, and kind of when they came over, he's always been there, and I think he did an incredible job. I'm not going to lie, David. I wouldn't be surprised if he ultimately gets plucked at some point this season for another head coaching job when eventually one of these MLS teams starts tanking throughout the season. So I do think that he did well there. I'm not overly surprised. I'm just glad that we didn't go with. There were some other rumors about picking up like a USL coach or things like that. Like if we were going to go that direction, there's no reason why we couldn't have just stuck with Hack. So I'm extremely happy that we got Olaf, but I think Hack is a great guy and a great guy that can ultimately will be the head manager or head coach of a club one day. I just don't think that it was immediate fit there. You know that Lutz always has his hand in the cookie jar overseas, so I think it's one where he's always doing those looks, and this is a guy that he ultimately liked the most.
You talk about getting plucked away. There are reports, rumors. I'll call them rumors because I don't think they're from Tom, about Roman Berkey. He constantly gets brought up, it feels like, when European X team needs another goalkeeper and needs to fill the spot late and all of that. Is there any worries around him for either of you?
So we actually were recording, David, when that news initially broke, and I think it was Tom that at least I had seen the tweet about, confirming there was some links there. And we were definitely worried. I'm a goalie by my background, and I realize, firsthand the value of having the league's best goalie, in our opinion here, especially in year one with how exceptional he was. Year two, not as much, but man, he was getting thrashed with the opportunity. So I'll look past that for a second here and just indulge. I mean, the idea of him leaving rattles me to my core. We would be a totally different team from a both, I'd say, leadership perspective as well as just his play in net. You cannot replace that. I'd be looking for a fee. I know he's within the last year of his deal, and I would want that fee to be pretty large for me to even begin to think about it, and I don't know what team's going to throw that. But the long and short of it is that Lutz was thrown this same question, David, in a press conference and totally squashed it.
Yeah.
That he will be City this whole year. There is no ifs, and, or buts about it. Doesn't matter who comes calling. And he said there was no urgency in the re-signing. And I want to make sure that I get what he's saying. But if you're going to, I think, continue here, and if Roman is interested in staying here, I do think you need to extend him and extend him very soon so you don't get, offers from overseas. You don't see temptations from some of your contenders in MLS that want to really shore that final position up and give yourself that leg up and back. So I worry a little bit. Not about Copenhagen, who I believe was the link there, but I do think this could be a storyline if we can't lock him up.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I would say normally I'm of the opinion of do you be active if someone's coming towards the end of a contract, get the move done early so it doesn't run out on you. A 35-year-old goalkeeper, I think, is a little bit different of if your best case scenario is he starts this full year and he walks away and you don't get anything, it doesn't kill me if this year's a good year. And so I think the way the roster's set up, you can be competitive this year. And if you get an offer in the summer and you're like, this is the best chance we're going to get, I don't know that you need to jump at it because of this very unique situation. The other being, he's 35 years old. He chose to come to the U.S. He chose to play here. You'd think that there was after playing life stuff that went into that. If he is of the opinion that this is where he wants to be, then it's where he wants to be. And if it's not, then he's probably going to go back to finish his career. And you can't really control that with the contract that you choose or don't. It is a unique situation, I think, in Major League Soccer because it's very rare for us to be able to say that. Normally you say you got to get something so you can flip it into the next player. Right. And that's sort of the whole game in building all of this. Let's go into Doyle's thoughts and then we'll jump off the back of that.
St. Louis's big swings for 2025 came in the summer of 2024. And honestly, I think they hit it out of the park with the acquisitions of Marcel Hartl and Cedric Teuchert, the two German attackers. And then add Simon Betcher as well, who they got on the cheap. He was, I thought, really, really good up top. He's probably not going to score 15 goals, but he's active and he pulls opposing defenders around a little bit. And he's really good pressing forward. And that's kind of what St. Louis needed. They weren't able to be effective pressing from the front, defending from the front last year. So they became a much better team down the stretch. And I kind of think that's what we're going to see from this group in 2025. minimal additions in this winter. The left back, Conrad Wallen, well, left wing back, I think, but also can play some central midfield. And then the veteran German center back, Timo Baumgartel. It's going to shift, I think, into a 3-4-2-1. I'm not entirely convinced that that's going to last. I thought they were just so good in the 4-2-3-1 once Teutschert and Hartl arrived that they at least have that in their back pocket. But Olaf Melberg, the 3-4-2-1 is what he had, the new head coach. It's what he's preferred throughout his entire career. And they have a lot of center backs now. So like the writing is very much on the wall, and it is what we've seen a lot from them in preseason as well. I'm bullish on it. I think the attack works. I think if they do get another center back out there, like in theory, that will help them be a little bit more solid defensively, which they struggled with the entirety of their existence. I'm still not convinced about their deep central midfield. Chris Durkin, I think, is just a guy, and Edward Leuven. He's not going to make up for anyone else's defensive shortcomings. We'll put it that way. So like, there's a little bit of weakness there, but there's also a lot more skill on the field than there used to be. And this feels like the first time going into a season that I have actual expectations for St. Louis City.
First time. Okay. Thanks, Matt Doyle. A lot there, a lot to take in. Let's start with the formation stuff. Justin, Jake talked about it a little bit with Olaf. What do you make of the potential move? Where do you think this team sort of settles in?
Yeah, I've kind of appreciated the best thing about Olaf being in so far is he's not scared to kind of rock the boat. And I think because that is something that Matt mentioned that we really did kind of focus on, and not perfect, but did it very well, the 4-2-3-1. And I think it's a little bit scary to think about us switching to a 3 center back with some wingers that are getting up and back. I do think that the way that the team has kind of shifted in the center back positions with Kessler, Nilsson, you throw Kyle Hebert in there, and you've got Baumgartel, and then you'll have Wallum and Totland as the wing backs. I think it makes a lot more sense. But I think you have this on later as well, David, is that like we have a lot of attackers. So by then adding a back 5, you're taking one of those guys off the field. When you look at guys that Klaus, Betcher, Teutschert, Hartel, Celio Pompeo, Rasmus Alm, Thomas Solstruck, Indiana Vasilev, it's hard for those guys not to get consistent minutes because obviously it's a confidence level thing with them, right? If you don't have the confidence, you're not taking guys on. So if we are going to go to that 5 in the back and you're losing an additional spot for those guys that we're already kind of having abundance, it's harder for me to wrap my head around, but I'm excited to see how it's going to play out the beginning of the season.
It does feel like a clean fit for Horn. I thought Horn was a little awkward as the true left back when he came in. It didn't seem like a natural fit for him. He's played a lot of center back in his career, and he was a bit more stay-at-home, which is fine if you're creating balance. It does feel like a clean fit for him to play at that left center back. We have seen in MLS, if you can get one of those wide center backs stepping into the attack in possession in those inside channels, you can start to create a little bit of chaos, and maybe it makes life easier for Durkin and Lovin to create chances if that center back can help sort of push numbers around in midfield and rotate things, and then you can start to see Lovin get into the edge of that final third where we saw year 1, he can hit that killer pass, right? He is dangerous, Jake, when he gets in zone 14.
Oh, absolutely. I think the best version of Leuven is the one where he can get up the field and have a little more freedom and not have to fit some of the job description qualities of a 6 per se. Because we've seen him play a 6, we've seen him play an 8, we've seen him play a 10. We had the fortune of sitting down with him, and I think the 8 is his most enjoyed position and just getting some freedom, and he does have some great vision. And sometimes I think you can see him force it a little bit sometimes too, but he's also got some of the final product in his locker. I mean, the guy, his ball striking ability is exceptional, both in the direct free kicks and indirect free kicks, but also just in open play as well. So I always love a version of him where he is able to get forward. I do worry about the cover in behind him. We missed Chris Durkin last season when he had the injury towards the end, and after that, you'd look at maybe a guy like Blum, who is now on loan as well, down in South Africa, and we thought he would be our destroyer in midfield, when we got him in season 1. But now gone, I think we've got very thin depth behind Durkin in terms of who's that kind of holding man. And maybe they rely on a little bit less with having 3 center backs. Maybe that's part of why you're seeing this. But, David, the only thing I wanted to mention, too, about it formation-wise that I've seen just in preseason is we lacked any sense of width last year, especially with our missing Celio Pompeo for most of the season. And Rasmus Alm, I could say the same thing for. So maybe this back three, into back five with your wing backs is a ploy, or at least a way to use more of the field and to be able to run the channels and generate more opportunities, on both sides versus channeling so much down the middle, which I feel like we were bogged down by a little bit last year. So I'm encouraged to see some of that in some of the preseason play. But again, we'll see if it actually works on the field. I do hope that we are flexible in some of these games and the adaptations can be there. That was not something you could say much about last year, even under Hackworth, I would say.
Obviously, all being Billikens here, I'm just adopting myself in. Shout out Larry Hughes and all the legends of the past. We've talked Simon Betcher, but we did not mention Klaus. Klaus was like the whole story, year one, right? It was the gift goals early on, but his ability as a big player to be so smooth in transition, to use his bursts of speed to create openings. 10 goals his first year, only 5 in his last year. And we spent 20 minutes talking about Simon Betcher and the other attacking pieces. What should the expectations be for Klaus this year?
I mean, Jake and I have kind of thrown a number out there. I think we said for him to be our number one striker going again into the season after this upcoming season, what goals kind of output would we say? And the overwhelming majority said he needs to be in double digits again. Yeah. I think it is a piece where if you're going to be a DP for this squad, you need to be able to put the ball away. I do think that he does a lot off the ball. Obviously, he's taking runners with him. He's a very physical forward, so he's a guy that can hold the ball up while taking runners away, letting other people slot in or slot them in as he's holding the ball up himself. However, I just got to see some goals this season. Yeah. I think we have a couple guys that can do that role that he's describing, but you ultimately got to finish and give us some more goals this season. So I agree. We've talked about Betcher. It's more of the exciting guys we brought in, and Klaus has kind of been that mainstay, but now he's got to get back up to full speed and just be able to finish and stay healthy. That's also been a problem for his.
Yeah, I was shocked. 1,900 minutes last year. Up from 1,300 his first year. I would have guessed it would have been the other way around. And I know he had the injuries year one midway through the season, but I would not have expected that he had a 600 more minutes played last year and then half the goals. If you got 2,000 minutes from him this year, I think with the attacking pieces in there, 11, 12 goals is an easy expectation. And that's going to be shifted a bit because Betcher is a better backup option than what you had, at least going into last year, although Adeniran put up some really good moments as well in numbers initially, and then obviously Joachini if you go all the way back to the first year. But there should be big expectations, and I would be hopeful that he gets there. And that takes us to our line from Andrew Wiebe, which is St. Louis over-under for the 2025 MLS season. Points per game at 1.5 per game. So last year, this team was way under that early on, but they finished on in their last 10 games on a 1.5 point per game pace, which, as Doyle said, if they had a few more games, probably would have made the playoffs. Let me give everyone the context around this before you guys answer. So last year, NYCFC finished 5th in the East on exactly 1.5 points per game. Minnesota finished 6th in the West on 1.53. It's about a 50-point pace. And 2023, St. Louis was 1.65 for 56 points. And, of course, first place in the Western Conference. So the question is if what we saw at the end of last year is sustainable and real for the full year. Whoever wants to go first, you can let it shoot.
Oh, man. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and give my response to that first. I'm going to go ahead and say over on the points per game. Of course I'm going to say over. But here's my reasoning is I don't think we are a squeeze into the playoffs team via the wild card avenue. And if that's what we're aiming for, I think that's not the case for me. We've invested a lot already in this team just of recently. I know it wasn't this window, the past one. And I think you have to be aiming for more, especially given the age profiles of some of those top talents that we do have. There's not going to be too much left. So I think that veteran experience, going out and getting proven quality talent will pay off in points. And I see us more of, probably on the lower end of the away spots in the playoff picture, and we'll see how it translates. But I think you've got to be aiming for more this season in terms of not just aiming to make the playoffs, but make some waves, establish yourselves, and be a really hard team to beat. We were way too easy to beat last year, way too open in the open field on transitions, and those are things you can shut down when you are, tinkering mid-game if you have to, or you do bring a new formation, and we're going to have goals. Goals were so hard to come by for us last year. think about the goal scoring talent that we had, and that translated in the back half of the season, or back third of the season, I guess, for us. And I expect us to pick up. Maybe it's not the same pace as it was towards the end of last season because things were going really well, of course. But I think over the course of a season, with heavy legs, we have a little bit lighter of a cup fixture kind of schedule, I'd say, this year compared to some of our peers. I'm expecting better things, and I think progress is mandatory given what we saw last year. You cannot spend the first half of the season just dwelling in the bottom half of the table. So I expect a better start this season and probably more of an even-keeled kind of flow.
Just because I didn't mention it at the top, the lone cup competition right now is U.S. Open Cup.
Yep.
For St. Louis, other teams are in 2. You've got the Seattles of the world and Miami who are in 3. So, like you said, less fixture congestion. Also, I think we're all thinking the romance of like a good U.S. Open Cup run in St. Louis while we are talking about what the future of this historic tournament is for a city that's been like the heartbeat of soccer in America for such a long time and the 100+ years of U.S. Open Cup. It would be pretty awesome to see maybe a semi or a final at City Park at the end of all of this. Justin, where do you fall on this line?
I'm pretty similar to Jake. I'm gonna say our realistic ceiling. Obviously, the ceiling can be first. I think realistic ceiling is 4th place, and that would then get us sneaking into that home field advantage in the playoffs. I'm gonna say our realistic floor is 7th place, and that would be making the playoffs, not inside the wild card, but somewhere in that middle. Which would then obviously, if you mentioned that, 57 points out of Seattle last year in 4th place, 50 in Colorado. I'm gonna give us a good 53, 54 points this season. So ultimately, I would like to be going into the last couple games of the season fighting for that 4th or 5th spot, kind of teetering back and forth. That's ultimately what my prediction is and my goal for this team. I will say, as you guys brought it up already, U.S. Open Cup, I think the first time that we had this as a team, we were just like, hey, we're new in the MLS. We didn't take it that serious. We were more focused on the actual regular season. I think that's how you should play it. But now that we've had our legs underneath of us and shown, wow, we can really compete here. We're not going to be just leggy from the amount of matches that we have. I think we're really going to drive for the U.S. Open Cup as well. And my goal there is to get to the semifinal at a minimum. That's one where you look at these teams, we are one of the better teams in that grouping of teams as well. And then you bring in MLS Next Pro. There's no reason why we can't get there. And also, without being in the Leagues Cup and having these other fixtures, we should be fine from a fitness perspective and a health perspective. So overall, I'm saying at least semifinal for the U.S. Open Cup, and I'm pushing for that 4th spot, but I'm going to predict that we're going to land in the 5th spot of the West.
Yeah, I would say Minnesota, Charlotte, St. Louis, probably the favorites in that Open Cup as of now, based off last year and what they did in MLS. I think I agree with you in that grouping, right inside that play-in, bordering into a guaranteed playoff spot or just above that play-in for this time. This is a time of year where I feel I end up leaning towards stability more. And while St. Louis wasn't the whole year, we're seeing a lot of what worked last year come back. And so it feels like it's what worked with a few more tweaks, adding a center back, adding a wing back. But the big unknown is the coaching. And that's the part where I think if it was John Hackworth, and not saying it should be, then it would, to me, be like, yep, 1.5, that sort of makes sense. Lock it in for a 6-7. And I think the window then becomes a little bit bigger, just not knowing how Olaf Melberg settles into MLS, what he understands about his opponents, how he sort of manages the travel and all this stuff, all of the cliche things where we talk about when it comes to Major League Soccer, let alone the weather. And all of a sudden that affecting the way your style can play and how high pressing can you play and all of that types of things. But I'm still going to hold and say that I'm going to go over on this line. I think that it's going to be right there around that 4th and 5th spot competitively, because I think from day one, it's a team that's going to have the depth to compete match in and match out, while other teams, we're a week out from the season, are still moving DPs around and figuring out where they stand, and will be making big moves in the summer as well that I think will affect their ability to be consistent. Well, I think we're going to be looking at a consistent piece in St. Louis, and hopefully one that will make it out there to go watch a game at some point as well. If you don't already, make sure to tune in and follow Ball Watching or listen to Ball Watching as your podcast covering all things St. Louis. Shout out to all of our Billikens, and let's do this again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us, David.